When a franchise goes into a state of dormancy, there's typically a multitude of reasons. The game didn't sell enough, it didn't receive good review scores, it didn't provide this experience. In such a volatile industry, it's easy to be left behind by your peers. If this game won't satisfy my itch, there's bound to be something else that will. The biggest, most successful companies typically have a formula that works to keep the cash flow coming. As you've seen from the title, there's one company in particular I have a bone to pick with today. Yes, the one we're all familiar with, the big N themselves, Nintendo. Home to so many legendary franchises, Nintendo is heralded as a pioneer in our beloved industry. It's totally warranted. They are industry innovators. Games wouldn't be where they are today without the likes of Mario 64 and Ocarina of Time. Even today, Nintendo continues to deliver stellar games one after the other, with no intention of slowing down. However, along the path of success, more often than not, there's a period of darkness that precedes it. For Nintendo specifically, we remember this as the Wii U era. It was such a torrid time for Nintendo that there were calls to have the legendary company shift to third party, developing software for other consoles. Could you imagine a world where the Switch didn't exist? That was a real topic of conversation back then. For me though, it's the time I realized the truth about a franchise I care about quite a bit, and the owners that abandoned it. A few months ago I released a video talking about StarFox. The franchise focused on a group of space animals protecting the galaxy from any threat that dares cross their path. If you watched the video, you'll know I think quite highly of Fox and his group of animal friends. From the concept of a group of animals traveling across space, to the tight gameplay. There's so many things I could say that highlight how much this franchise means to me. I made a whole video about it. And since I'm pulling StarFox back into the limelight, I think it's time to tie up some loose ends. I alluded to them after all. Two games I've actively avoided for so many different reasons. StarFoxCommand on the Nintendo DS, and StarFoxZero on the Wii U. There's a bunch of different reasons I've avoided these games, but one always stands out above the rest. These two games essentially put Star Fox to bed for good. They're the biggest contributors to Star Fox's downfall in my opinion, and a lot of the problems stem from Nintendo directly. And it's the topic I wish to discuss today. What exactly did these two games do to essentially kill a franchise that Nintendo has supported since 1993? What exactly does a game have to do to kill a franchise? It's such a tantalizing discussion. Let's not hold off any longer. This is how Nintendo failed the Star Fox franchise. Released 1 year after Star Fox Assault, Nintendo collaborated with Q Games to bring us StarFoxCommand on the Nintendo DS. So in my last video on Star Fox, I mentioned how Assault felt like the end of that era for Fox and his friends. It ended almost perfectly, leaving things ambiguous enough for the player to use their imagination while delivering a somber yet heartwarming finale. Why do I bring this up? Well, StarFoxCommand is, believe it or not, a direct continuation of this saga. Yeah, I was shocked too when I started a new game. Apparently after all the adventures Fox and his friends embarked on, the Star Fox team started to grow distant from one another. Falco leaves once again to pursue his own career as a solo merc. Slippy settles down and is actually the first to get engaged. Peppy retired from active combat and took over the mantle as leader of the Cornerian army from General Pepper. And Fox and Crystal do get together, but eventually break up and Crystal reacts by joining Starwolf. Wow, that's a lot to digest there. I don't even know what to really say here. I guess it kind of makes sense for all the characters to split off after saving the galaxy with each other time after time. Before you know it, however, you're thrown into the first mission and it's time to play the game. While structured similarly to most of the mainline games, StarFoxCommand has the most unique gameplay in the entire series. Instead of it being an action-adventure game or an on-rail shooter, StarFoxCommand is a strategy game tasking you with destroying every enemy on the board. These enemies are divided between grunts you'll face in classic dogfighting fashion, and missiles that set their aim towards the Great Fox. Essentially, they want to destroy the Great Fox. You need to do whatever you can to stop them. Your objective is collecting enough of these core medals from enemies in these missions to clear the level. You'll only collect enough core medals by defeating every threat on the field. You can control up to 4 ships at a single time and control them using the DS touchscreen to draw a line of where you want your character to go before ending your turn. As you explore the field, you'll find different items such as your own missiles the Great Fox can use to shoot down incoming airborne enemies, to extra shields to heal your ship. When you engage in combat with the enemies, you'll be taken to an R-Wing segment, where, with your designated pilot, locate the designated number of core medals you need to collect. You'll start your first combat section with 100 seconds, and this time will carry over into every mission you tackle throughout your time clearing the level. You can earn time by barrel rolling attacks and finding items in the overworld, and that's it. That's all StarFoxCommand is. On paper, this all seems like standard stuff with a unique gimmick, typical to most of the entries in the series. However, in execution, StarFoxCommand is easily, and I'm not joking, easily the worst game in the entire franchise. It's so awful that I think this stands among some of the most embarrassing titles Nintendo's attached their names to, and there have been some doozies. Am I over-exaggerating a bit? Perhaps I am. However, I firmly believe this was the first real step that set Star Fox on the path to irrelevance. Obviously, if I think something is truly terrible, there has to be a bunch of different reasons that lead me to that conclusion. The first of which being the overall gameplay and controls. StarFoxCommand, like many other games in the series, takes heavy inspirations from Star Fox 64. The combat in its entirety is ripped straight from the tried and true formula we're all familiar with, just with some tweaks to fit the Nintendo DS. And the changes they decided to go with make Command easily the worst controlling Star Fox game in the entire franchise. Back in 2006, the DS was still fairly new, so yeah, I get that a lot of games for the system would have touchscreen bullshit to deal with. And sure, maybe it's me. I'm older now and haven't actually played a DS touchscreen game in a long time, but almost all of the appeal this game is borrowing from is absent because you can't really control your ship. To steer the R-Wing, you'll use the DS's touchscreen with the stylus. Take the stylus and point it in the direction you want the R-Wing to go, and sure enough, you're on your way. Double tap the top of the screen to boost, or double tap the bottom of the screen to brake. To shoot your laser, hit any face button repeatedly to rapid fire and hold the button to charge your homing shot. And yes, we can also somersault and U-turn whenever we please. Everything combined creates a moveset that's fairly simple. So, in theory, this game should be pretty easy to master. In execution though, just look at this. Does this look fun? Does this look controlled? How am I expected to have precise control to precisely aim at my enemies using a tiny stylus on a tiny touchscreen? The answer to all of this is a resounding no. Across the board, this game controls like Hi-ya! Like I said, I'm a bit older, and the 3DS I used was the tiny original model from 2011 I got fitted with a capture card. And this control scheme is just not comfortable for what you need to accomplish in the combat missions. At first, I was holding my 3DS up using the left trigger to shoot while I steered around with the stylus, and I shit you not, I got some serious wrist strain from doing this. Eventually, I figured that placing my console on my desk, using the D-pad to shoot while I steered the ship was a much better option. It made it a lot easier for me to play through the combat segments, but it didn't make it any more enjoyable. When the movement is restricted to the touchscreen, you, in theory, get the most precise control possible. But in practice, that couldn't be further from the truth. Similar to gyro control, the average human can't precisely navigate with a control field that's this specific. Especially on a tiny device like this with hands as big as mine, this is a disaster to navigate. Watching the footage back, I don't ever think I got a full handle on how best to navigate the R-Wing. I'd say I was pretty lucky to get through this game as quick as I did. I can't really emphasize it more than what you see. It doesn't look smooth. It lacks any sort of control, in turn making this game artificially difficult. I had a lot more trouble than I expected. I do not exaggerate when I say it took me over an hour to beat the first level of the game. On one end, a lot of my problems had to do with the controls as I've illustrated, but the structure of the levels also contributes to my overall negative feelings towards Command. As I mentioned previously, the levels are no longer just a mission with one specific task. StarFoxCommand has you on a small field with your goal being to clear the board of any enemies and to collect the required number of core medals. To clear the board, you will take each pilot and draw their path out until they run out of fuel. Once you've decided your course, you'll end your turn and each pilot will go each place you drew them. And you know, this is again very cool in concept, but just executed so poorly. Again, maybe it's because I'm a little old and I don't possess the best art skills, but personally, this feels a lot more difficult than it needs to be. Once I finally figured out the best way to strategize my pilots and clear the level in the most efficient way, I got a handle on things, but even then it was far from simple. I was never able to draw a straight line to get the pilot where I needed it to go, and it caused me to waste multiple turns to get my preferred formation lined up. This would in turn waste more time, require more drawing, and ruin my score even though the guy who had this copy of the game before me was on something else. Geez, 9,999 top score. That's crazy, salute to you. I could never get a score this high. And what you're actually doing in the combat segments is whack. When you're in the thick of it, you'll control up to 4 ships, with each pilot possessing their own unique ship to take into combat. Since the Star Fox team broke up, it's only natural those who actually left the gang use their own ships as opposed to keeping an R-Wing. Also, I'm assuming R-Wings are private property. Well, I guess Falco had one in Adventures. Anyways, it's cool to see everyone have their own ship because not only do these offer a chance to look into more of the technology in Star Fox, they each have unique abilities tied to each of them. This game has quite the roster of characters, and I only went through one of the 18 paths this game has on offer. So I played as Fox, Falco, Slippy, Crystal, Cat, Bill, and Amanda, Slippy's fiance. Fox has the standard R-Wing, standard homing shot, standard everything. Falco has a smaller shield gauge but doubles his fuel meter and has access to the homing shot that can lock onto 3 targets. Slippy, Crystal, Amanda, and Bill all virtually have the same ship, high defense, low fuel meter, and Cat's ship uses an arc reactor blaster while also having typical shields and a typical fuel meter. It definitely offered variety and had me carefully choose who should go where depending on the obstacle that laid before me. I think out of all the ships, Falco's was easily my favorite. I love that high risk, high reward gameplay, and even if I couldn't get a handle on the controls, Falco's ship compensates with having a multi-lock homing shot. None of the ships are totally different from each other that it drastically changes the gameplay, but if there is one positive, the variety of vehicles on offer are probably it. Regarding the rest of the structure, I unfortunately do not have much good to say. I expected all my line drawing to be worth it, but when you're doing the same tasks on repeat, it becomes very repetitive very quickly. As early as the first level, your brain will be hardwired that every encounter is fighting a certain amount of enemies to grab core medals. Hell, even in missions where you destroy the enemy bases have you eliminate targets that have core medals before throwing you into a quick side thing that feels almost like a QTE, and that side QTE event is recycled when you have to stop the missiles. Honestly, just across the board, the gameplay in StarFoxCommand is really just not good. Just awful, well and truly to its core. As I said, I only went through this game normally, and I struggled to even do that. For a moment, I was content with doing 1 or 2 levels and skipping the story because it's just that unfun. Everything Star Fox from a gameplay perspective represented is destroyed in favor of what I would call a tech demo at best. But I pushed through so I could get the full picture as to why this game started the downward trend Star Fox would eventually go on. And the part I've neglected to mention till now is the story. StarFoxCommand canonically is the final story in the franchise, meaning that everything that happened in the other games is relevant in this game's universe. I already mentioned that the team would grow distant from one another, eventually going their separate ways. During the intro monologue, we learned that the galaxy is under threat from a new enemy known as the Anglar Forces. Since the team is broken up, Fox decides to tackle the Anglar Forces by himself on Corneria. After defeating the threat on Corneria, Rob suggests Fox seek out his old crew for support in his mission to defeat the Anglar Forces. This is where the game breaks off into its many different paths. Every so often, a dialogue choice will come up and once selected, will choose the destination of your next mission. Since Falco is my favorite character in the franchise, as soon as I saw his name, I knew immediately which way I was going. So Fox decides to seek out Falco for help, and when we find Falco, he's currently dealing with Anglar forces on Katina solo. While Falco is saving Katina by himself, he's surprised when Bill of the Cornerian army shows up to lend his support. Even if it is scripted for this segment, I was pretty shocked when I saw Bill come by to lend a hand. After Falco and Bill successfully wipe out the Anglar forces, Rob intercepts a transmission from Starwolf that reveals that Crystal is actually working for them now. After this shocking revelation, Falco decides to figure out what's going on and locate Starwolf's location. En route to their location, Falco runs into Anglar forces near an asteroid field and decides to take them out. Falco seems to be struggling when Cat, his flirtatious feline friend, shows up to lend a hand. Even after successfully wiping out the Anglar forces, Falco loses the trail on Starwolf. Rob suggests they rendezvous with Fox, which I decided to oblige to when given the chance, since it made more sense to let Fox know what was going on with Crystal first before taking action. When Falco meets up with Fox, he finds Slippy there as well, as they are having trouble finding Slippy's fiancée Amanda. During our mission, Amanda shows up to lend her support so we can defeat the Anglar forces on Aquas. After saving Aquas from the Anglar Scourge, Falco lets Fox know Crystal's status and whereabouts. After Fox hears this, General Peppy contacts them about Anglar activity on Sector Z, so Fox plots a course on the double to avoid the ongoing problem with Crystal. When they arrive at the scene, they unsurprisingly find Crystal as well. There's no time to talk though, as the team needs to defeat the Anglar forces surrounding Sector Z. After defeating them, Crystal reveals she joined Starwolf to spite Fox, due to the fact that he dumped her. Crystal offers her sincerest of apologies for her actions and rejoins the team. Meanwhile, the Anglar forces are starting to notice the Star Fox team's activity, however the Anglar Emperor remains confident. Fox and his team make their final push to defeat the Anglar forces in the asteroid field near Corneria. After wiping out all the forces, the Anglar Emperor reveals himself and the final battle commences. Well, this isn't very climactic. After defeating the Anglar Empire, Rob receives word from Starwolf. Wolf asks how Fox and his team are able to keep swiping in on their score before being quickly shut down by the rest of the team. Crystal apologizes to everyone on Starwolf, especially Panther. General Peppy thanks them for their work, and Fox claims he couldn't have done it without the rest of his team. General Peppy expresses how proud he is to have seen Fox grow into the leader he is today. The team departs, and the epilogue begins. The Star Fox team reunited only for a short while. After only a few months, Crystal left the team and rejoined Starwolf due to her love for Panther. The story doesn't specify what happens to Falco and Slippy, but we can infer that they also left since the text reads that Fox wanders the galaxy alone. And then the credits start rolling and the game's over. And just like the the beginning of the story, I don't know what to think. It's a mockery of the entire narrative Star Fox has told up to this point. Again, this is only one of 18 endings in the game, but the fact that it's even in the game is insulting. I'm not saying everyone necessarily needed to have a happy ending. If things ended on a bitter note, I'd totally understand. The story just disrespects almost all the character development a lot of these characters have gone through. To get the least offensive stuff out of the way first, I think Slippy and Peppy are done justice. Peppy is just way too old to be flying, and the amount of times he's risked his life earned him the rank of general. Slippy maturing and deciding to settle down even though he is technically the youngest out of the group shows how far he's come as a person. Flying isn't the only thing that's cool to him anymore, and I like that, but that's just about where it ends. You'd think after leading 3 successful missions prior to this one in this timeline, Fox would have a handle on his team. I get it, everyone has their own goals and ambitions in life, and these characters are no different. But to completely mishandle the situation the way he did, and to not learn from his prior experiences is shocking. Fox is the main protagonist. His name is on the title. His character arc is just a wild roller coaster. He's calm and collected in 64, kind of regresses into arrogant and bratty in Adventures, rediscovers his composure in Assault, and just falls apart in Command. When your poster boy is nothing more than a time bomb of emotions waiting to implode, how do you expect people to get excited for your game? I can't understand how he forced Crystal to leave the team even though they just saved the world together 5 minutes ago. He was already down 2 members when Falco decided to go solo and Slippy decided to get hitched. How arrogant can you be? The game says he did it to protect Crystal, but you can't save the world with a team twice if we don't include Adventures, and think going solo is your only option. Strength in numbers, man. The leader has to know that. Star Wolf shows up once the entire game, and even then they're ruined. The Wolf I knew from Assault would never accept one of Fox's teammates as his own. Wolf also doesn't seem like the type of guy who will succumb to his teammates' wishes, assuming Panther pushed for Crystal's addition. He's the leader of a pirate gang. He can't afford to be soft. But the biggest blunder Command has with its characters is Falco. God, did they have to turn up the testosterone to max when crafting this lone wolf personality for Falco? Anytime Rob offers up a perfectly logical suggestion, Falco shuts him down with a quick, yeah, I know, or a, no one gives me orders. It's infuriating. This once cool as a cucumber rogue pilot gets turned into this meathead who only wants to do things alone. He's always had a bit of a friendly rivalry with Fox, so he would make an aggressive comment here or there, but by StarFox Assault, Falco had fully accepted his role in the team. He's taking matters much more seriously, if not a bit arrogantly. How we got here is mind-blowing to me. Considering my playthrough, as you probably heard, was pretty Falco heavy, you'll realize why this is a much bigger problem than it initially sounds. And I mean, the story as a whole just has no stakes or weight to it. Star Fox storytelling in the past was brilliant because it wove in the character development as you tackled an almost larger-than-life adversary. None of that is present here. There's no grand threat. The Anglar forces, narratively speaking, aren't a threat at all. The fact that Fox and his friends have time to worry about what Crystal's doing should highlight the lack of threat the Anglar pose. It's just as bad as the gameplay, and on any other day, you might hear me say it's worse than the gameplay. It fails as the final send-off Nintendo wanted for these characters, essentially solidifying Star Fox's place amongst the rest of their IP. As a whole, StarFoxCommand is the worst game in the franchise. There's nothing good here. It's rotten to the core. Terrible controls, terrible gameplay structure, terrible story. Just everything about this game is fire! It just fails in every metric a game has. Not to an embarrassing degree, but enough to where it's all obviously noticeable. It's not a good showcase of how good this franchise is, and as a finale to a long saga that started in 1997, I find it very sad. I don't have too much else to say really. I think I've talked about this game enough. I have the perfect spot on my tier list for this one, that's for sure. I'm imagining you all hearing this and thinking, yeah, this is what killed Star Fox. And I guess in a few cases you might be right. But funnily enough, no, StarFoxCommand was not the game to take Star Fox and his friends away from the spotlight. It's a huge contributing factor, but there's another game in this story that put the Merc group to rest in my opinion. If you're into Star Fox like I am, you already know what I'm talking about. The Star Fox game that came out on Nintendo's worst selling console as arguably the flagship title to have. It's the tale of how one of the industry leaders in gaming exposed themselves for what they really are. What a story it is indeed. Released in April of 2016, StarFoxZero acts as a reboot of the franchise. It's essentially another remake of the original Star Fox, recontextualizing a familiar adventure. Nintendo enlisted the service of Platinum Games to develop this entry in the series. And let's not beat around the bush. People do not like this game. Since this is essentially a retelling of the original story and it operates similarly to a typical Star Fox game, I won't go everything like I would normally. Instead, I'd rather talk about what Nintendo did differently in this interpretation of Star Fox. For all intents and purposes, this is a reboot of the franchise, so it's plausible to believe Nintendo did take some feedback into consideration to improve the formula. And it's certainly something, alright. To keep things fresh, let's talk about the story first, because there's not much to really even discuss. It's virtually the same as Star Fox 64, but things are a bit more fleshed out. Near the finale of the game, General Pepper explains that the Cornerian army worked together with Andross to create a teleporter to spread peace across the galaxy. Andross fell mad with power, and the Cornerian army decided to use the teleporter on Andross to teleport him to another dimension. So technically, yeah, that is explained in Star Fox 64, but it's in the intro title crawl, whereas here it's directly mentioned on the adventure. We still don't get to see any of these events at all, not even a flashback, but at least now it's actually explained how Andross went mad with power. It's brief, but hey, it's something I'll give points to. Other than that, there's nothing else really new with the story. There's all new levels that showcase more voice lines between our characters, but it's not like you're gonna hear any of it. StarFoxZero is one of those games that splits its audio between your TV and the gamepad. On the gamepad, you'll have your comms so your team can communicate with you, and this is actually really cool when you're playing. Even if it's faint, you feel like you're in the seat of the cockpit. But I can't actually play any of the voice lines here since it's all coming from the gamepad, and I had no way of capturing it through my entire playthrough. Here's a sample for what things sound like when you're actually playing. If I were to play any of the footage from what I captured, this is what you'd hear. It's infuriating as a content creator because I'd say the portrayals we get for all the characters are some of the best we get in the entire franchise. It doesn't reach the highs of the performance in Star Fox Assault, but these were quite good. A shame you won't actually get to hear it. The main topic of conversation when it comes to StarFoxZero has to do with the gameplay. You know why this game is infamous. It forced gyro controls on you to control your cursor. I played this game when it first came out, even got it the first day to give you an idea of how hyped I was. And when I first played this game, boy did I ever hate it. I just couldn't get a handle on how the gyro controls worked. I had no idea where to place the gamepad in my hands. This led to a playthrough I remember taking well over 10 hours. That's just one playthrough, just trying to go from beginning to end. I am not joking. The final boss took me multiple days where I had to put the controller down multiple times just to regain my composure. The fact that this was 6 years ago and I can still remember it clear as day should speak volumes. I was putting off this video because I was dreading having to relearn how to play this game, but surprisingly, I was locked in this time around. I captured footage of Command and Zero back to back, so maybe I was already used to making do with poor controls. I tweaked some of the options like turning gyro on only while shooting and constantly resetting my cursor to the middle. I was able to finish the entire game in 2 hours. I was genuinely shocked. And yeah, I had my fair share of frustrating moments, but I don't know. I guess I really wanted to get through this as quickly as possible. That doesn't mean the game's controls are any good. More so, I was just locked in so much that I was able to adapt pretty quickly. The gameplay entirely, though, it's not very good. There's a lot of changes made to the core gameplay. Elaborating on the controls a bit more, things are tweaked to fit the gamepad control scheme. Maneuvers like somersault are locked to a single button rather than inputting a quick command to activate. I already mentioned the cursor being locked to gyro controls, and the boost and brake button are locked to the right stick. It's pretty comfortable all things considered. I didn't have much trouble in terms of navigating the field of view given to me in each level. My biggest problem, unsurprisingly, would have to be with the gyro control. Sure, I was able to get a handle on things, but when you're focused on a single target, the lack of actual precision really shows. Similar to Command, in theory, the gyro controls are supposed to give you precise control over the entire cockpit, even for the most minuscule of movements. But again, similar to Command, in practice, this is far from the truth. When compared directly to touch controls, I found gyro to be a lot easier to figure out. The brilliance of the joystick is that even if you get 360-degree movement, for the most part there's enough nuance in the feel of a game to make it feel smooth as you tackle whatever tasks in front of you. I praise Star Fox 64 because it captured that sweet spot you'd want from the controls of an on-rail shooter. Ripping away that nuance in favor of gyro controls, in my opinion, will always have the opposite effect. It doesn't help that the Wii U was the first time gyro controls really even existed, so even if the controls felt better, there was bound to be some issues. And it also doesn't help that some of the gameplay here really doesn't do the controls any favors. When deciding to reboot Star Fox, Nintendo had Platinum Games add a bunch of new ideas into the fold. In the Star Fox universe, that usually means one thing: new vehicles. In StarFoxZero, we not only have our old reliable in the R-Wing, we also get access to two new vehicles, the Walker and Gyro Wing. The Landmaster is in the game, but for reasons I'm sure I'll make apparent later, I didn't get to use it. Went through the entire game and didn't come across one level with the Landmaster. From what I can remember, it kinda controlled like butt, so I'm glad I didn't have to use it. The Walker and Gyro Wing are cool additions. I'm glad there's more gameplay variety. But again, in execution, these aren't anything noteworthy. I'd even go as far to say they're bad. Okay, the Walker is fine. It's not too egregious. The main problem I have is that the cursor is fully gyro controlled. That setting I had on earlier doesn't apply here or on the Gyro Wing. It was really jarring when I'd switch to the Walker and have to quickly switch to aiming mode on a dime. And the missions with the Walker are pretty whack. Shoot the butt of King Kong here, then carefully hover on his back to hack his terminal. With the amount of jank this game already possesses, this just becomes downright awful. The Gyro Wing is pretty though, no two ways about it. When you're in the Gyro Wing, you'll typically have to navigate across the battlefield and find terminals for your little robot companion Direct Eye to hack into. And the Gyro Wing just controls like a boat. I guess that's the intent so you can slow down much easier, but it's so slow it's nauseating. Accelerating forward and backward is locked to the left stick, while maneuvering up, down, left, and right is locked to the right stick. The controls definitely accommodate the slow gameplay, but it doesn't make it any better to actually go through. The Gyro Wing definitely adds variety, just nothing I'd actually want to do. And since this was the dawn of the Amiibo era, we of course got some stuff there too. I myself have both the Fox and Falco Smash 4 Amiibos, as they each bring a unique twist to the R-Wing. Input Fox and you get the original Star Fox R-Wing from 1993, and I never used it because the Falco Amiibo gives you the black R-Wing, where you will take double damage but receive double the offensive power. The standard laser is stronger. The homing shot locks onto 2 targets at a time. In a game with subpar motion controls at best, the double homing shot was a godsend. And I mean, come on, look at it. This R-Wing just looks so much cooler than anything else in the game. This does essentially turn the game into hard mode, and I welcomed the challenge. Like I said, I was locked in. Nothing was going to stop me from getting through this as quickly as I could. The black R-Wing was my weapon of destruction this time around. So yeah, nothing really terrible. The tools you have at your disposal I'd say are more than adequate enough to see you tackle your objective. Well, for the most part anyways. Most of the missions I had to go through saw me in a typical on-rails level that would end off with a boss fight. When you enter a boss fight, the Star Fox team will typically transition into all-range mode, giving you full 360 control over the battlefield. The on-rail sections are pretty decent. The motion controls weren't too much of a problem, so I was able to put full focus on the enemy as they approached me. But the all-range sections are easily the worst part of the game. It's the part of the game that highlights why gyro control is just inferior to a joystick. I can't fathom the reason as to why, but someone decided it was a good idea to add in Z targeting? I guess in theory it makes sense to quickly find your target while you're trying to navigate the area to face your opponent. But if I'm facing Starwolf in open space and my only way of aiming is gyro control, how am I supposed to reliably hit their ships? They're so small, even getting a homing shot with these controls is difficult. It sucks. And if I did have to redo an entire section, it was most likely due to my struggles in the all-range portions. And I guess that kind of wraps everything I want to say about StarFoxZero as a game. As you can probably tell, I wasn't really a huge fan. It's definitely not as poor as StarFoxCommand. That's a precedent I don't see being topped for a long time. But for what this title needed to be, StarFoxZero falls short in a lot of areas. It makes the jump to HD pretty smoothly. The game looks beautiful. I suffered a few frame drops, but for the most part I didn't run into too many issues. And the presentation is on point. I mean, the camera angles, the transitions, it is really some of the best Star Fox has to offer. But the gameplay is at best mediocre, and for a majority of its runtime, I'd say it's below average. If you're just looking at StarFoxZero, you'll see that it definitely passes the eye test. It looks and sounds like a typical entry in the franchise. However, it doesn't feel like the Star Fox I remember. If someone were to ask me about Star Fox, I'd describe it as a franchise that delivers intense, fast-paced action with tight, precise controls. StarFoxZero only delivers this intense action in glimpses. The on-rail sections can be pretty cool when things are going your way, so that's pretty fun. I mean, they aren't the best in the series. Star Fox 64 still has them beat, and considering they typically typically end with a shitty all-range section, yeah, these aren't really all that good. And the controls are just so poor, it creates a barrier to entry that essentially doomed this game from the start. Unless you're a huge Nintendo fan, I don't see the appeal of playing StarFoxZero over any of the other iterations this game is replicating. I have never genuinely met someone who's actually preferred motion controls, so if you are that person, I'd say you find some enjoyment here at the very least. For the people in my camp, it just won't ever feel as good as compared to the standard joystick. In a game where your mission is to shoot down multiple targets as quickly as possible, having the most precise control is essential. It's the only way a game like this works. You just won't get that with StarFoxZero's gyro controls, and it dampers the entire experience. Imagine the frustration you'd feel if you missed a crucial shot just because your wrist jerked over a tiny bit. It's terrible. I'll place this one in the pretty bad tier. That seems about right. StarFoxZero isn't this embarrassing mess of a game, but it definitely played a huge part in this franchise's eventual demise. I would argue it played the main role for where we are today. StarFoxCommand is 100% a worse game. It's unplayable. The fact I got one playthrough done for this video is a miracle. Where StarFoxZero failed isn't so much the game itself, it's definitely not good, I can say that with certainty. It has to do with what Nintendo wanted Star Fox to be, and why it inevitably failed. Normally I don't go too far into marketing research in my videos, however, since this is the last Star Fox game that was released, I figured I'd do my due diligence. It was only when I looked it up that I discovered the truth. I don't think it's some sort of hot take to say the Wii U was a colossal failure. That's universally agreed on. The console didn't really see that many original titles from Nintendo as one would have expected. StarFoxZero was one of these flagship games. Even if it was indirect, it was meant to sell Wii U consoles. Bringing us to the main reason Star Fox flopped. From what I could gather, Nintendo created StarFoxZero so the franchise could become one of Nintendo's flagship series, one that could rival Mario and Zelda. It never stood a chance. This could have been the greatest game of all time. On the Wii U, the worst performing Nintendo console in history, there was just no way. By April 2016, the Wii U was well and truly dead. It was one last ditch to get Wii U's into houses before their next console, what we now know as the Switch. StarFoxZero was advertised everywhere. TV adverts previewing what you can do in the game. Bits in Nintendo events to advertise the product. Going so far as to bring back the puppets from the original game's marketing. And even going full Sonic with an anime prologue before the game's release to get everyone hyped. Am I the only one that remembers this? This 15-minute video acts as a giant hype trailer to really entice you to see the entire adventure through by picking up the game. It's the only time we get to see the characters just kind of vibing and hanging out. It's awesome and it's well worth a watch. The marketing of StarFoxZero put the franchise back on everyone's radar, and as history has shown us, it simply did not live up to the hype. And I'm left wondering why this had to be the case. There had to be a better way, right? Hindsight is a beautiful thing, as they say. And with history on our side, there's a multitude of different ways Nintendo could have handled this. If the Big N is so insistent that StarFoxZero has to be a Wii U seller, then why not make the game more grand and adventurous? If Star Fox 64 didn't succeed with that on the N64, what could possibly have made you think that it would on your worst selling console? Oh, gyro controls, right. That worked out super well. Maybe something totally new and fresh would be exactly what the franchise needs to draw in wandering eyes. Like how Zelda did less than a year later. If you create something that's new, then the awesome marketing push you already had could have been even better. Tap into the energy you created with the prologue. Add a bit more personality to the game. A variety of different gameplay styles that aren't just pilot missions. And an original story to jumpstart the reboot on the right foot. But alright Nintendo, I see you. This is the game you want to ship. You totally believe this is what we want. Then don't push this on a failing console. Wait a year to put it on your newest hardware that everyone can't stop talking about. 2016 was a wild time. It almost feels like a different world since the Switch came out. The hype the Switch had going into it was unprecedented. I had never seen anything like it. You couldn't go anywhere without seeing one tweet, one article, one podcast without people talking about what Nintendo had in store next. Gee, doesn't it seem like it would be perfect if we tried bringing Star Fox back on a device like this? Oh no, that's right. Can't compromise the motion controls. The thing everyone's been wanting forever. I guess they're right. The Switch probably isn't the best platform to revive a dead series anyways. Psst, who's gonna tell them, guys? Granted, I'm not familiar with how a company decides when a game should be released and what platform it ends up on. But again, with hindsight, we know games on the Wii U that had gamepad functionality made the transition over to the Switch smoothly. StarFoxZero could have too. When I played StarFoxZero, I barely looked at the cockpit view, so you can easily tie the cursor controls to gyro on the Pro Controller and fine-tune it for handheld mode. These are just a few of many possibilities that could have seen StarFoxZero released in a much better situation, but it all leads to the same conclusion. Nintendo failed Star Fox. They didn't support the franchise when it needed them to. They released a below-average product in the worst circumstances possible. They pushed something that didn't live up to what they claimed. We got conned. Nintendo got us again, and it cost us the entire franchise. Was it worth it? Was it worth killing the franchise responsible for arguably the best form of space combat in the medium? Was it worth sidelining arguably the most unique and interesting cast of characters the company has ever developed? Nintendo seems to be doing just fine without Star Fox, so I'm sure they think so. And where does this leave us? Well, it's been over 6 years since StarFoxZero's release. Time flies, right? The only real Star Fox news we've gotten is a leak that Retro Studios was developing a Star Fox racing game, but that was debunked a few years ago. Yeah, nothing. We've had nothing since StarFoxZero, and it doesn't seem like Nintendo wants to do anything else. It makes a lot of sense. They're thriving right now. Why rock the boat? Stick with the formula that works with the IP that's gonna deliver. I get it. And if Star Fox really isn't coming back, then I guess all I can say is it's been a fun ride. From the first time I heard Fox say,
"We're entering Corneria City now,"
I was hooked. The tight gameplay of 64 had me on the couch for hours when I was a kid. When I finished a run, I'd immediately start a new one. Adventures brought my imaginations to life, taking Fox out of the R-Wing and giving him a full world to explore. And Assault took the base its predecessor created and crafted a high-octane action shooter that always had me on the edge of my seat. Yeah, Star Fox has always had problems. Every game does. But amongst all the issues, the games were still fun at the end of the day. It's such a shame the series went out the way it did. The two titles I've talked about today do nothing in showcasing what made Star Fox so great to so many of us. When people think of Fox and Falco today, they typically remember them from Smash Bros. Maybe it's because they remember that these two characters have been Smash mainstays since 64 and Melee. Maybe they saw Mango pull off another ridiculous combo en route to another victory in a Smash tournament. My point is that people forget where these characters came from. Smash Bros is a title that celebrates video games and what they've achieved. Star Fox has been there since day one. That's a big deal. But a franchise that is as big as Star Fox, led by one of Nintendo's most powerful figures, Shigeru Miyamoto, seems like one that shouldn't be in this situation. Hell, even Pikmin is getting a new game. Are you kidding me? I could go on all day, but I guess my overall takeaway after playing through every single game is that this franchise is more. Fox and Falco are more than just characters in Smash. Star Fox is more than a second-rate Nintendo series. Maybe it's time for Miyamoto to move aside and let someone who's hungry and eager to create take over so we can finally get whatever it is this franchise needs to bring it back to life. If that day ever comes, I hope Fox & Co. get their time in the spotlight. They've already saved the Lilat system more times than I care to count. They've definitely earned it. Until then, I can only imagine the Star Fox team is out flying across the galaxy, waiting to be called back into action.